But before we dive into that, our first topic we want to open up with is a topic we actually had wanting to discuss for a while is Final Fantasy XIV crossovers. There's a number of them we've already had in the world of Final Fantasy XIV. And being that we've had those, we also feel, I mean, at least me personally, it feels like we haven't had a big significant one, a new one. I would say probably a new one since the Rathalos event, unless I'm misremembering anything. Chris, like, am I, like, I know we had a couple come back, like the Yokai
15's
Watch.
come back. I mean, we've had Yokai twice. Garo's back right now. The 11 one came back. So they've been cycling back through.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Yorha and Rathalos made permanent additions to the game, so they just kind of chill. But we haven't had a true like sit down with the dev from the other game as the second half of the live letter and like let's go collab with them in a big, meaningful, profound way. In a while.
Mm-hmm.
There's been questions as recently as the most recent Q&A asking about Kingdom Hearts. There's been questions about crossovers, but there has not been a crossover or an announcement of such. It's always just that continued, we're interested, and that's it.
I think Yoshi P talked about with Kingdom Hearts, like the it would be expensive because the mouse has got to get their cheese.
Like $5 extra to your sub or something crazy. Like we would all have to pay more every month, probably for the rest of time.
Yeah.
To have a one-time crossover.
And for anybody who's thinking like Soro, isn't he Final like Square? No, like
No.
Disney owns all of those characters.
They own everything.
Yeah, they sure do. They sure do. Speaking of
you guys are just lucky to let you wear all the socks in the sock drawer. They own some of everything any of us have ever looked at or thought of.
Yeah, so I was
Thank you for this water, Disney. I really appreciate you letting me drink it for pushing it through the pipes.
The dystopian Disney future. Disney, Amazon, Microsoft, probably going to be like pick a faction.
Apple,
right?
Google.
Oh yeah, I forgot about those two. So
the United Nations of companies.
Yeah. It's like they're gonna. Yeah, it's gonna be nuts. So outside of that, like when you brought up Yahora, I completely spaced on that because not to like sit here and like that's I think the weakest moment in Shadowbringers for me was the raid, not the mechanics. The fights I thought were fun.
Oh, a blast.
But I was like, man, I just don't think that landed. And so for me, I don't know why. Like, I don't even associate that as a crossover. But I said Rathalos, and I was like, no, you're right. Like, that would be considered a crossover, a permanent fixture. So Rathalos, there's we saw obviously with the PvP event recently return, which was great because we haven't seen that in a while. And the speculation is that's going to dip out. And I don't mind if they dip it out, if it does return. I just wish we had a little bit more like, yeah, it will return in 2 years or in...
It returns every time we get a new PvP mode or whatever.
Something.
And it comes for a year.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we saw that come back. But like in terms of like future like crossover events, I mean, obviously 16 would be the most logical choice. Do you think?
As the next one?
Yeah.
You're going to pick a game that hasn't come out as the next most logical.
Yeah, when 15 was coming out, that's when the 15
can't we just shout out something
happened.
like Project Triangle Square or Octopath Traveler or something? Isn't something like that just as reasonable? Something else that they can make a phone call?
How cool would it be if they did a collab with Triangle Square?
When you push /follow, you follow like right behind them.
Well, like you could have minions and things like that, but start to think about things that we haven't seen investment in. And you have the Verminion, right? Like you have that mini game. How interesting would it be if they were like, yeah, let's go ahead and build this strategy game. We're gonna take that and use your minions.
If you beat all of Lords of Verminion, the last fight is delightful. It's a lot of work to get there, and it can be beaten. There are a number of minions that can beat it alone. I did it with Lesser Panda, but the moment I say that, usually in chat, people sound off with a bunch of minions, and I just spammed Lesser Panda till I won. I didn't win first try, but I did win like second or third. The minion that you get from beating the last Lords of Verminion PvE fight is one of the rarest minions in 14.
Yeah.
Not because it's hard, but because nobody is willing to play through 24 matches of Lords of Verminion.
Oh, that's so
it's
funny.
Like 4% of players.
Just 4% of the 27 million.
Of the 27 million.
That's wild. Tactics Ogre, I think, would be like There's a lot of within Square Enix that would just, I think, makes it easy. Obviously, I think Hearts is off the table. That'd be wild, you know. So I definitely do not think we'll ever see a Kingdoms Hearts crossover in 14. But things like Tactics Ogre, Final Fantasy Tactics, we've already seen that similar, you know, with the Evilise. So they're like, there are these things, and if it is like outside Tactics Ogre, which isn't Final Fantasy branded, so I wouldn't consider like, you know, the Final Fantasy Tactics as a technical crossover, because it's kind of all encompassing of this theme park of Final Fantasy nostalgia. Tactics Ogre would be cool. Like that would be something pretty sweet. I think they're remaking that game, right, Zoila? Like, just sound off in chat, because I think that I've heard they're actually doing something with the Tactics Ogre series that got me excited, and I immediately forgot. I see also chat weighing in with Chrono Trigger. We already have Dragon Quest. We already have a Dragon Quest crossover, and I'd love to see them bring that back. What do you think?
I Yokai Watch, when it came back, it got like upgraded as an event. So the other thing they could do is, like, say another Monster Hunter was coming out, they could come back and level that event up by like reinventing, especially with the ones that go away. So like Yokai Watch came back and there was like the original piece plus the new piece.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a recycle like the 15 event, where it was just a relaunch of the exact same event. So they could go ahead and bring some of those events back and kind of upgrade them or modernize them if that's appropriate for the franchise. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think most likely a Square Enix title would be the next one. I would want, like, my two dream ones would be that they partner with Breath of the Wild 2 or that they partner with World of Warcraft.
Yeah, doing a Nintendo crossover would be sweet. Because there is a nostalgic history. Like, when you think about Final Fantasy, at least for me, for the first part of it, it was all Nintendo. And then we've already seen them do various different things with Nintendo, where they're launching like Octopath Traveler and things like that. So if they were to bring in some Zelda into Final Fantasy, I would love to know, chat. Like, would you guys want to see that kind of crossover? And would you be any kind of concern? You know, I mean, again, when we talk about it, it doesn't have to be so dramatic as like bringing the two worlds together, but imagine having like a Link, you know, kind of glamour, right? Imagine having these kind of like, you know, various different things. Does that break the immersion of the game? Does that ultimately?
I'm a pig, so
well,
I'm not your champion.
But you're also what? You represent one like what percentage of the 27 million, right? Like, it's like, you know,
I regularly get into duties where behind me is a chicken and a hippo, like
a chicken, pig, and a hippo. We like, just
an elephant or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, what is happening?
Yeah, that would be wild. I think this is just for me, like, in terms of it, like when we start to talk about kind of that nostalgia. Obviously, Square Enix IP is huge. I've seen people in chat sounding off with Xenogears. Like, Xenogears is the game that I just wish we could see remade, reborn. But there's some like these old JRPGs that just like based off of licensing, like the original Breath of Fire is this like collaboration that it just seems to be locked in some kind of licensing hell between various different people, that it's like, oh man, I'd love to see a Breath of, like, the ideal is like, people have already named them. Chrono Trigger would be incredible to see. Then you start talking about like the classics. I see like, the Dragoon. Legend of the Dragoon. There we go. I was like, why am I thinking Lagoon? I was like, that doesn't make sense. So like some of these classic, Square Enix titles would be the best way to go about it. But then if we start talking about like, oh man, I don't know if I'd like to see, because then it's like, the dream would be Mario. Like, if you're saying, like, I'm more of a Mario guy than a Zelda guy, but I think if they put like a Mario-esque stuff in Final Fantasy 14, I would have to say that's jumping the shark. Like, we've literally gone, way too meta at that point. Like, oh, the Mushroom Kingdom and what have you. Like, what, like the lore just implications when you start talking to the lore guys. It's like, okay, how do we just like, do we make any kind of like parallel connections? Get Chris Pratt as a part of the Mario trailer. Final Fantasy 14, the ultimate crossover. Guardians of the Galaxy. What do you think?
I mean, Yeah, as we start to talk about like Chris Pratt and Mario, it starts to make you wonder what would you want from like a live action representation of 14. So that becomes a totally different conversation.
Yeah. They're still working on the Netflix, right?
Can you imagine if a Realm Reborn, the source material was the basis of a TV show? Because a Realm Reborn, the video game, didn't necessarily become like the best use of that source material. There's a lot of moments that I think could be done better with more resources, more time, and more like hindsight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's already a crossover with 14 in PSO2, and Yoshi P said that they were going to do that in Final Fantasy 14 because PSO2 wasn't global; it was just localized to Japan. But now that's no longer the case. So I'm with Kippy here. I would love to see them actually collaborate with Phantasy Star. I think that would be really, really cool.
I could do some weird stuff with glamour. That game takes glamour. Don't worry. You think Vieira can't wear hats? They'll let you put a mask on a character whose like nose sticks out of the mask. Like they do not care. You can put whatever you want on that character.
Whatever you want.
Whatever you want. Like, but it doesn't look good. That's fine. We did not check for conflicts. Just equip it. It's totally fine. I don't know. Square Enix made the Guardian of the Galaxy game. Yeah, but that was the Montreal studio, which is the part that they sold off.
No, that's been purchased by Embracer.
So they no longer have access to. That was what, Deus Ex, Guardians of the Galaxy. There's a bunch of non-14 stuff.
Yeah. All right, so to take the topic kind of to the next level, but focusing in it within Final Fantasy, I think I've seen a lot of people in chat, and I echo this, would love to see a deeper connection with other Final Fantasy games as a part of the whole. Like Endwalker, very heavily influenced by Final Fantasy IV, and that story, especially even in the post-story, patches. I've seen 9 and 10 brought up. I know you're a big 10 guy, and I know we've had some underwater stuff, but no Blitzball. Like, do you think that there could be still more influence that they could bring into the world of Final Fantasy 14 from 10? Or is there another also Final Fantasy that you feel like from a source material perspective, you'd like to see them draw down from?
I mean, anytime we don't bring up Blitzball in this conversation is a mistake. So like, let's just get that all the way out of the way. Because that question gets asked every 9 to 12 months of Yoshi P. And because we always get new players, we've had like 6 or 7 people in chat this week that were over on Twitch while we're streaming, come in and say they're just getting started in the game, or they're thinking about getting started in the game. By the time they leave, they're like, I'm installing now. And so like we've had a lot of new faces in here. That's been absolutely awesome. Sometime in the next 6 to 9 months, those people, that's going to be the first time they've ever heard Blitzball could come to 14, which will be exciting, and then followed by disappointment. Because the answer is no. The answer is no. But outside of that, I really liked the way that Ishgard Restoration made Diadem its own thing, and I really like that like Deep Dungeon gets to be its own thing. Lords of Verminion gets to be its own thing. Like I like when something can go just break the way that system works in the rest of the game. So I think that if you're going to bring something in from another Final Fantasy game, of course we can continue making references to the bosses and the various lore and races and places and things like that. But I also just really like, as we start talking about like limited action type systems going into Criterion and all this, like I would love more references to the way all that stuff works. Like it still feels like a huge just baseline disservice that Phoenix Downs are not more useful unilaterally across the game.
Yeah. I completely agree. I would love to make them stackable at a minimum. And because especially with content like Deep Dungeon coming up, Phoenix Downs end up kind of having but put a long cooldown on them. Like you could make them so much more inventory friendly. You get one.
I had my one Phoenix Down in my inventory for 3 or 4 years. I've probably only used half a dozen of them in the whole time in the game because I always hold on to it because it's my one.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to see more connections brought in with 9. We have some stuff already with 8. We've got, Gunbreaker, very heavily influenced, I feel like 8 by its core design. But personally speaking, I think 9, and check and correct me if I'm just not remembering, but I don't feel like 9 actually has a a bigger influence, right? Like when we start talking about going to, like maybe assuming we're going to Meracidia, like Zoila feels like 10 would be a good fit for Meracidia. 9 could as well. Like you could kind of bring in the mist. You could kind of like do some various different things with that area. What do you think?
If we spend more time in Ilsabard and we get a rebuilding in Ilsabard, we could bring in stuff tied to 7. You know, there could very much be like Mako reactor type vibes up in Ilsabard. Like, so yeah, I think as we start to look out at 7.0 and the references it's going to make, I think there's a ton of options. Plus, it's amazing that Amazon Game Studios is over there in the East in the New World. So,
how crazy would that be? How insane would that be? Like, y'all thought Sony was buying us. It's been Amazon the whole time, and we seeded this idea like way back when we launched this game, and the New World ends up being literal New World. Like, hey, welcome to Eternum. Like, how pissed would so many people be? Like, we were in chat, like in Discord yesterday. I'm not going to call them out because, like, no judgment. You don't have to play New World if you don't want to. But the statement was, I'll never play New World. Like, okay. like, in my opinion, you're missing out. But that mindset, all of a sudden, it's like, I would be tickled. I would be so bemused by that aspect. How sick would it be if Amazon was the one who bought Square? Like everybody's thinking Sony or like Microsoft, and then meanwhile it's like, you know.
I mean, the player in me would be bummed to see Yoshi P get a new boss of any kind. The Twitch streamer in me says if we had half the Twitch drops that New World did, we could have so many cooler glamours, we could have so many big cooler community events. And Twitch drops, the way they've been handled by New World and by Guild Wars, are so much better than the like mixed feelings that we've had with some of the 14 events, where there's been this really beautiful, amazing thing. They said, hey, everybody's loving the game. We're going to bring back a mount that was not even available in some regions. And all you have to do is support creators that you love and you get this mount. And then it just becomes this pain point.
Yeah.
And then we're going to let some players go off and get to play this game. And like for others, it just becomes this pain point. And so like the scalability of the Square Enix community team hasn't matched how rapidly the community's grown. And so what the community team does is amazing. And it's a love letter to us, and it's passionate. And anytime I've had the chance to interact with anybody that either works direct for the community team or works for any of the companies that they hire to help them put these events on, it has been nothing but a pleasant experience. I've been invited to all of them, and I assume everybody who has the same feeling. The one advantage Amazon could do is Amazon seems to crush when it comes to like, we're ready to promote something and we want everybody to just have a good time. Like, they
also have really, really deep pockets. Yoshi P's talked about.
Oh yeah. I don't think it's the Square doesn't.
He wishes he had Blizzard's budget, and then all of a sudden it's like, I bet he would look at New World's budget and be like, oh man, Blizzard's budget's nothing.
Amazon's like Blizzard's budget.
Blizzard's budget.
My ATM doesn't even ask me for confirmation if I pull Blizzard's budget out.
Yeah, exactly.